This program is intended for informational and educational purposes only. All views and opinions expressed are the views and opinions of the individuals and sponsors presenting them, and not the LTB network. Enjoy the show.
This is Sex and Science Hour with Brian Sovereign and Dr. Stephanie Murphy. Get your freak on.
Hello and welcome to Sex and Science Hour. This is episode 10. I'm Stephanie and you are Brian.
Of course.
Hello. Thank you for tuning into our show.
Wow, we're in the double digits now.
I don't know how we lasted this long, really. We thought no one was going to listen to our show, but apparently some people do.
Yeah, some. I mean, we still get the same amount of listens and downloads. And
Poor Adam B. Levine. He thought this was going to be like a professional show of some kind, and we just totally train wrecked the entire network. So anyway,
someone's got to do it.
Yeah, someone's got to do it. And I think what better person than us?
That's right. The headbangers ball of the Let's Talk Bitcoin network.
Oh, there you go again. So Brian, we just got back from a lot of traveling, didn't we?
We do. Oh boy, talk about a lot of traveling.
I'm still recovering from it. We got home yesterday and I still am like, man, I need a major vacation from my vacation.
Yeah,
Although it wasn't really a vacation, it was more a working trip. We were at the Inside Bitcoin's New York conference, as we mentioned on the show 2 episodes ago, I think. We did a big recording session 2 weeks ago and then we got home and realized, we need to record again.
Yeah.
But we went to the Inside Bitcoins conference in New York City, and then we headed to Toronto, basically like the next day, to go to the Toronto Bitcoin Expo. The Toronto conference was probably the one that I like better out of the two.
Certainly.
Although there were some cool things about New York. Mostly it was outside of the conference, just the people that we saw there. Got some good content for Let's Talk Bitcoin, was interviewed for a couple of documentary videos about Bitcoin. So, that was kind of cool. Got to interview some cool people. Those will be probably coming out on Let's Talk Bitcoin soon. But the conference itself in New York was just, I was really disappointed to see how focused it was on regulation and sort of first world issues like that. And it was just like, I was on a panel about remittances in the developing world and Bitcoin. And even on that panel, everyone else was just talking about, well, how can we make this KYC compliant? And it was like, really? The people who are getting like microloans and remittances don't care about that. You realize that, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there just wasn't much talk about like the actual ideas. It was more like this stuff that's imposed by the government. So I was disappointed about that,
It's unfortunate because you go to some of these, not all, because the Toronto conference wasn't this way, but you go to some of these conferences and they're all asking for regulation, and they forget, they don't realize that the reason Bitcoin is having a conference is because it grew the way it did.
Because of the libertarians.
Well, because of no regulation, because it wasn't regulated. It was allowed to thrive because it didn't have this regulation. And so it's just ironic when they think that somehow regulation is going to help it get bigger, when what made it big in the first place was the lack thereof.
Oh, now they're saying, step aside, libertarians, we're done with you. Yeah, you've served your purpose. Go away now. I will not be going away, personally. But, maybe I'm just grumpy because New York City is just like, everything felt like it was being rationed. It was like this survival scenario. We live in New Hampshire out in the sticks, and we're used to having wide open spaces and a lot of room to move around and do whatever we want. We live very freely up here in New Hampshire, and in New York, it's just like, wow, you're always being kind of funneled into these tiny spaces. And like, we tried to go out to a restaurant with a group of 9 people. Normally, that's not an issue at all where we live, and there wasn't room at the restaurant for like that big of a group to sit at the same table together. So we had to like sit outside. It was really weird, and it was raining, and you couldn't get a taxi, and the taxis were more, even like we used Uber, which we're going to talk about later on the show. That was more expensive when it was raining. It just felt like everything was like scarce, and like people were fighting for resources. My car got dinged in the parking garage. Oh, it was just.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lack of, I grew up in New York City for a while, and I think that there's just a lack of mobility that exists there. And look,
Well, you mean like if you're there, you can't get out?
Well, that I don't necessarily mean that, but I mean just like you can't really get around very well, and like and you feel a lack of freedom in that. And look, I'm a parkour guy. I'm all about coming up with alternative ways to get somewhere, but all those ways are illegal by the city. So whatever,
probably taking an Uber is illegal too, but we did it
probably
anyway.
is, but who cares?
Come get us.
Yeah.
Anyway, Toronto was a little more open. I like that city. That was the
nice
first
city.
time I was there. They've got a great Bitcoin community up there. There's Anthony Diorio with Bitcoin Decentral, and the conference was very community focused. Although there were a good amount, I noticed at the conference, there were a good amount of kind of like, I called them like leftist trolls, basically. They were standing up at like every question and asking about like, what about these kids in Africa that don't have phones and like are living in a muddy hole in the ground? And what about them? They can't use Bitcoin. And what about the fact that, 1%, they were talking about like the 1%ers of Bitcoin, like the people who are adopted it early. Now they have most of the coins. And it was interesting. I thought, like, I gave a talk about women in Bitcoin. It was called like, what does Bitcoin offer to women? And I really made it very individualism focused. It wasn't like a feminism talk. It was not a man bashing talk in any way. Right. I said that at the beginning of it. I was expecting a bunch of libertarians who would be ready to chew my head off because I said women and not people,
Yeah.
But instead, I got like the total opposite. Like there were a bunch of like radical feminists in the audience who were like, telling me that I was part of the patriarchy and stuff. So that was kind of interesting. It'll be on YouTube if you want to watch that later, I'm sure. And Brian, you did your is Bitcoin more real than gold talk. How was the response to that?
The response seemed pretty positive. So it was a talk that went all over the place where I, pretty much discussed the problems with all currencies, including gold and Bitcoin. And I didn't get to some points, but I think we might be able to get to them in this episode of Sex and Science Hour.
Oh, sure.
To where I didn't get to talk about Bitcoin's biggest threat.
Well, Ethereum was very prominent at this Toronto conference because, that there's like kind of a base there and Anthony sponsors Ethereum and so he's part of the team and so forth. And, I have to be honest, I'm a little concerned that Ethereum is like the New World Order.
I have no comment.
Okay, well, we'll find out a little bit more about that later. And we'll kind of reserve judgment because we got to move on. We've got some stuff to talk about. There's actual news happening in the world. On our travels, I thought this would be a good thing to talk about, like kind of segue in from talking about these conferences. On our travels, we did a lot of, using these alternative kind of services that are popping up now, like Airbnb and also like some of the ride-sharing apps like Uber, Sidecar, and Lyft. And
Sure.
If you don't know what those are, they're basically apps that allow people, the last three that I mentioned are apps that allow people to share rides. So you can request a driver, people are driving around the city, you can see them on a map with GPS, they pick you up, they give you a ride somewhere, you pay them through the app, and
incredibly efficient, very easy, all very fast.
Cheaper than a taxi.
Yeah, blows away anything the taxi services are doing or even the hotels are doing.
And of course, in most cities, taxi service is incredibly regulated. In New York, you have to get these medallions, which is like a taxi license that costs, like last time I heard about this, it cost $100,000 to get one of these medallions and that you have to have in order to drive a taxi legally.
Granted, you'll make $100,000 easy. I mean, inside of a short period of time.
But where does that come from? That comes from the people who are paying for the rides.
Right.
And they're getting just like turned upside down and shaken for their money falling out of their pockets. I mean,
someone's got to pay for it. Yeah,
it's nuts to pay that much money for a taxi cab. And so these apps are kind of improving that. And, aside from the cost, there just aren't enough taxis. That's the other thing. Mm-hmm. Like people have a demand to get from place to place in a city that's hard to get around in. And they sometimes need rides because it's raining or they have trouble walking or whatever, I mean, and it's just, kind of there's not enough taxis.
Right.
And, so these apps solve a problem. Same thing with hotels. Airbnb, you can rent out your house or your apartment or an investment property or whatever, or a summer home or, anything, any kind of structure to visitors who find your listing on a site like Airbnb or 9 Flats, which 9 Flats now accepts Bitcoin. which
fantastic.
is interesting because an Airbnb doesn't, as far as I understand it. And Brian Armstrong from Coinbase, the founder of Coinbase, used to work at Airbnb.
Oh, wow. You'd think there'd be an in there.
You would think, yeah. But the Airbnb's got their problems because obviously, just like the taxi drivers don't like Lyft, Uber, and Sidecar, the established hotels do not like Airbnb or Nine Flats, I'm sure, even though that one's not as popular.
Right.
So what do? They appeal to the city for regulation, and that's what we're going to talk about first here on the show. There's an article that I found in Time, which is, I really don't like Time as a periodical. I think it's like its time has passed.
Yes.
But they're covering this issue, and apparently in California, where is this? I think it's in San Francisco. There's some politician who's like claiming that people are abusing Airbnb. They're getting, second apartments so that they can rent them out on Airbnb. And the city already has an affordable housing crisis. Not that that's caused by the government or anything like that. And the price of housing is going through the roof and something has to be done. Won't someone think of the children? Please think of the children. No, they haven't really pulled that canard out, but they're proposing this legislation where you can only rent your place out on Airbnb if you live there for at least 3/4 of the year, which is 275 days. So how are they going to check on that, by the way?
Right.
They'll have
Define live there.
Right. They'll have to apply to, if you add up all the time you spend at work, it would probably be like more than 1/4 of the year, because some people just sleep in their apartments, sometimes, or they sleep at work sometimes.
Considering how much
really
the average person works, I mean, what do you spend in your actual home? 50 days a year,
right? Yeah, which is ironic because you're working so hard. It's like that meme that's like, work is something you do to afford the house that you can never be in because you're always at work, and the clothes that you have to wear to work, and
to afford this, to afford the house you never spend time in, and blah blah. Yeah.
I love working at home because it saves so much time and money, and it's awesome. It's just like really freeing. But anyway, so you have to live in your place for at least 3/4 of the year, and you listen to this. You have to apply to be in the city's registry of approved hosts. And to remain in the database, you have to pay $50 application fee to the city, and you have to prove that your property has insurance of at least $150,000, and you have to collect taxes from the guests, which are basically a hotel tax, commensurate with the hotel tax. Okay. So what is that going to do? Drive out a lot of listings so people won't be able to get a place to stay when they go to San Francisco. It's going to increase the cost for visitors or consumers. It's going to take away a source of income for people who are renting out their apartments for a little cash on the side.
Right.
And it's going to just not be good for anybody except for the city.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, like we mentioned earlier with Bitcoin, how did it get so big? How did it get so popular? Mm-hmm. It's because it wasn't regulated. Airbnb just did its business.
Yeah.
Now,
and it solved a problem. Right. Airbnb wouldn't exist if there were cheap, affordable, and easy to get housing everywhere in the country.
Right, exactly. The people who are hurting from Airbnb are not consumers, are not your everyday people. The ones who are hurting are the hotels.
Yeah, the established entrenched businesses.
And if they have a problem with it, the answer isn't to regulate against Airbnb. The answer is for them to come up with a better business model, or to figure out. It's their job to figure something out. The people figured out Airbnb. It's up to these, these big hotel, or
the taxi union,
or the taxi union to figure out the problem and to solve it on their own. It is not for them to go lobbying to the government to say, no, you need to solve this for us right now, or we're going to be out. We're going to be out of business. Well, then you go out of business. If I don't offer what people want, I go out of business. That's how it works.
Right. That's how it should work, in the absence of someone interfering with things. But it's really sad. I mean, I saw a picture of these taxi union people protesting the app like Lyft, Uber, and Sidecar, and they've got these signs which look like they're very professional looking signs. I think they paid a lot to print these signs.
Right.
But there are these signs that say, "Would you ride with a stranger?" Ooh, scary strangers! Right now they're pulling out the children. Unregulated equals unsafe.
Let me tell you, we took an Uber.
That's another sign.
You know what Uber came? It came a nice, long, black Lincoln Town Car. Thing was practically a limousine, cost practically nothing. Mm-hmm. You're driving around in pure class in the city.
Yep.
Okay.
Very nice, chatty drivers.
Fine, I'll hop in a taxi, in a jalopy that's barely getting down the road.
With no seatbelts.
With no seatbelts, if that's what you want.
Yeah.
Or I can pay a great price for a premium driving experience.
Yeah.
And it is all about the consumer, folks. Screw the business and the
car,
government.
if that was from a limo company, or it would have been from a limo company because no cab is that nice. But if you paid for that car from one of the entrenched businesses, it would have been hundreds of dollars. And, we paid $30, to go across town in New York or Boston or whatever. So, I was in LA recently and I wanted to get a ride to the airport and I used Lyft. Actually, that was my first time using it. And the guy who gave me a ride was super nice. Like, he had a basket of water and candies in the backseat of his car. Mm-hmm. The car was brand new. He was incredibly nice. He told me that he quit his full-time job to be a driver for these services. And he was telling me about how he has to kind of go into stealth mode and turn off the apps when he gets around the airport because the cops at the airport actually patrol and look for Lyft or sidecar Uber drivers and try to ticket them and stuff.
That's so insane. Our incentives are just way off. Why exactly are we paying for police to give a damn, about who's giving you a ride? Because if it was your friend, that you just knew and you gave them $20 in gas. Hey, thank you. It was nice visiting you in New York City. Thank you for dropping me off at the airport. Who would care? You can't legislate this stuff. It's all a joke.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's really no difference between a Lyft car and your friend. Look, there isn't. People can email in, but trust me, there's just, at the end of the line, at the end of the day, of the morality, of the ethics of thinking of that, there's no difference.
It's simple, just protectionism through and through.
And my friend doesn't need a medallion.
Yeah, this article here that I've got from Daily Tech, they actually say that in New York, the taxi licenses, the medallions can cost up to $1 million each.
That's
insane.
That's absolutely insane. No wonder their cars suck.
Yeah, no wonder their cars suck, and it's so expensive to get a ride.
Yeah.
There's a regulation that's being proposed in Seattle that limits each of these companies, like Uber, Sidecar, and Lyft, to 150 drivers on the road at once. So, decentralized organization. How are they gonna? How are they gonna enforce that? It's just like. That's a point where they can fine the company and collect money from them for being in violation of this constantly, right?
Right.
There's another lawsuit in Austin, I guess, where they're trying to crack down on these companies. In Philadelphia, they have done sting operations for illegal cab drivers. And who does that protect or help except for the entrenched taxi drivers? It just hurts ordinary people who are trying to get a ride for a reasonable price.
And then they say, well, the taxi driver's got to make a living. Sure, work for Uber, work for Lyft. No one's telling them they can't.
And it's, here's a quote from the spokesman for the Philadelphia Parking Authority. He's talking about these sting operations. Sidecar drivers are passing themselves off as taxis, and they're not. It's clearly not about technology. This is about... Any guesses? Public safety.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, because taxis are, they never have it.
You know what?
They always drive safely. They never peel down the street.
Let me tell you, one of the other cars we got into through Uber was a huge Chevy Suburban, one of the largest vehicles ever produced. Okay? You're going to tell me I'm safer in one of your little Camrys? Or one of your little, your Ford Focus or something? No, sir. Get me in that Suburban.
Yeah. And, with taxis, there's no feedback. You know what I mean?
No.
I've gotten into a lot of taxis because we've been doing a ton of traveling this year. I've gotten into a lot of taxis this year where it was really difficult to communicate with the driver. And please, I'm not complaining about people not speaking English. That's no problem with me. But it was just hard to communicate with them. They weren't very communicative or responsive. I didn't exactly feel super safe. Sometimes I try to look for female cabbies just because I feel a little safer with them. But sometimes you don't really have much of a choice. It's just whoever shows up.
Well, they monopolized the field until now.
Right.
And so they feel like they have no need to please you.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. Like, there is no system of feedback, or there's no rating that you can give them, except maybe not to ride with that cab company again. But if you're from out of town, you really don't know what the reputation of the cab companies is. You know what I mean? And like, how do you know actually that somebody didn't steal a cab or something, isn't just driving up to you and saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a taxi"? But with these apps, you have clear instances of feedback. You can give the driver a star rating. And on some of them, if you rate the driver below 4 stars, the driver gets banned from driving and you never get paired with them again.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, there's a great system of feedback in place with these apps. They're really decentralizing something that badly needs to be decentralized. It's just government's getting in the way as usual.
As always.
So, Brian, this segment we're out of time, but coming up here on Sex and Science Hour, we are going to talk about FaceBucks. Get ready for this.
Oh boy.
It's Sex and Science Hour. Stay tuned. There's more coming up. Sex and Science Hour is part of the Let's Talk Bitcoin network, and we are so excited.
Wait a minute. What's Bitcoin?
What's Bitcoin?
What's Bitcoin?
Well, you'll have to listen to Let's Talk Bitcoin to find out. It's a twice-weekly podcast, and you can find it at letstalkbitcoin.com.
Okay, I gotta know.
Yeah, you really should probably get on that.
It has a whole network?
Yeah, we're part of it.
How did I not know about this?
You must have missed the memo that we were on their network. Anyway, now back to Sex and Science Hour. Here at Sex and Science Hour, we love EasyDNS. They let you register domains, handle security for your website, email addresses, pretty much anything related to DNS or domain names, they can do it. They have a friendly staff of actual human beings, so if you need customer support, they will always be there for you. Plus, they are outspoken advocates for your internet freedom. And they take Bitcoin, of course. They now have fully managed WordPress and web hosting too, so you can do everything you need related to your website from EasyDNS. Take a look at their website at easydns.com. We think you'll like what you see. Trust easydns.com for your DNS and web hosting needs. Now back to Sex and Science Hour. This is Sex and Science Hour. Welcome back to the show. Woo-hoo. Brian, you're dancing again. This is so much fun. We're doing the show from our standing desks.
Yes, I love 8-bit music.
I know, it really gets you dancing. Are we just too white? Like, is that the problem? We're just so white and nerdy. Oh boy. So, FaceBucks. We got to talk about this.
FaceBucks.
So, Brian,
say that 3 times fast.
We're going to file this under the "we called it" department. How about that?
How about that?
Because I remember more than a year. It was definitely more than a year ago, right? When Facebook had their IPO.
Oh yeah.
When did they do that?
Yeah, that was a couple years ago.
Was it 2 years ago or was 1 year ago? I thought it was last year.
It was the beginning of 2012, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you're right about that.
Or not beginning, but
maybe,
like May 2012, around there. I want to say maybe that summer.
Yeah, it's hard because even though we do a podcast, we don't really bother fact-checking too much. So
yeah, admittedly. So anyway.
We weren't prepared for that. But anyway, it was over a year ago that Facebook did their IPO. And at that time, I remember having a conversation with you about the idea that what they were going to do in the future was they were going to roll out some kind of credit or digital currency system.
Yeah.
And you nicknamed it FaceBucks. And then, over time, us talking about it, we had trouble pronouncing it and occasionally started to just call it FaceBucks.
Right.
So apparently now they're making this a reality.
Yeah, I mean, what I was actually more calling back then was the way the new timeline, which now there's a new timeline, but at that time, the new timeline, as compared to the wall, had a lot of open real estate. And,
I remember
that. I think they're going to set up a store. Or they're going to set up something, or they're going to set up like a wallet that you can have, like that there was just so much empty space to put things.
Yeah.
And so, I theorized that there would be, now there's been like Facebook, like you could buy a Facebook gift card so that you could put money into Facebook games.
Nobody does that though. I've never received one.
Yeah. I mean, I think in big cities they probably do, but I've never done it. Then they had Facebook gifts where like you could send a bottle of wine or something, like, I don't know if it was a bottle of wine, but you could send things to people.
Nobody sent me a bottle of wine.
No, right. Yeah. I mean, of course, wine.
Yeah, we don't drink anyway, but still, it's the thought that counts.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. Now apparently they're talking to Ireland, and they're wanting to get some degree of financial institution status. Is that right?
Yeah, they applied to the Irish Central Bank to become an e-money institution that would allow them to issue units of stored monetary value that represent a claim against the company. This is coming from the Irish Times. People are speculating they're going to get into the remittances market. They're going to be doing mobile payments, which Google has also said that they're going to maybe do some more with mobile payments. They're always very vague when they make these kind of announcements, but apparently Facebook already has some kind of authorization as a money transmitter in the U.S. or some forms of money transfer.
Google has that too.
Which lets them do in-app purchases and things like that.
Yeah, well, and lets you send money through Gmail, things like that. Yeah.
Have you ever bought anything on Facebook? Or
No.
bought anything because you saw an ad on Facebook?
No, never.
Yeah.
But admittedly, a lot of times I have ad block on, so you can't always see it.
Well, there's always that, yeah. But I mean, what do you think about this? We did have a conversation on Let's Talk Bitcoin a little while ago about big companies like Amazon and Google, like they don't really have to accept Bitcoin because they're probably going to try to make their own coins. They're just going to ape it. And is that a good thing for Bitcoin or a bad thing?
Yeah, I think this is definitely a case of where they are trying to mimic Bitcoin. I do think the reason Facebook is buying up a lot of big name alternative companies and alternatives kind of to what they even do,
right?
Like Instagram or WhatsApp. And I think they know their time is coming.
Yeah, because the young people are leaving Facebook. Yeah, younger than us. We're kind of old.
Right. I mean, and Instagram has taken over as the number one social media app on mobile devices. So fortunately, Facebook owns that. So I think maybe while they still feel they have a name and some power, they're trying to diversify as much as they can do. And do
you think this will really be helpful for remittances? I mean, because if a lot of people who are in the whatever old country, they don't necessarily have Facebook accounts or smartphones or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and in countries where remittances are really needed and needed in an easy fashion, Facebook's blocked.
That's a great point. Yeah.
So I don't think it really serves a purpose. I think this is just Facebook kind of trying to pull, in my opinion, like a late or early aughts Yahoo, where they're trying to be everything.
Right.
And that's just going to, pretty much be the nail in their coffin, I think. So, is it going to hurt Bitcoin? No, because Bitcoin is so much more.
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of thought if these big companies like Amazon or Google or Facebook or whatever make their own coin or their own kind of credit or whatever, I think, but of course, it wouldn't have all the great features that Bitcoin has. Things like, it would probably be really easily there would be a lot of restrictions on it. That's what I think. You wouldn't be able to use Facebook coin for off Facebook purchases, and you wouldn't be able to use Facebook coin and send it to Iran because there's terrorists there and so forth. And you wouldn't be able to do all these. You can't. It would be all these restrictions on it. Yeah. But with Bitcoin, people would maybe be exposed to the idea of digital currency through something like Amazon or Facebook or Google or whatever. And then eventually they hear about Bitcoin and they're like, oh, this is like Google Coin, except nobody's telling me I can't. So this is better. So I think it could be a positive thing for Bitcoin.
Yeah, it might show people the advantages of Bitcoin, but I do think there's one company out of the bunch, and I know we're going to still talk about them, that could actually do the better job, and that wouldn't fall prey to a lot of what you're talking about, and that's Amazon.
Well, yeah, why don't we just go right into that and talk about it?
Sure.
Amazon recently came out and said they are not going to accept Bitcoin because they haven't been hearing from their customers that it's right for them. So they don't have any plans for it. Now, I think that's a load of poo.
It is.
Because I know that personally, a lot of people who have been contacting Amazon for years. And in fact, their entire business's Bitcoin store pretty much exists. Well, they exist as a profitable business and to make a profit and so forth, and to get people electronics for Bitcoin. But a lot of their reason to exist is because they're a competitor to Amazon who doesn't accept Bitcoin.
Right.
And you can get electronics through them at 0% markup. with Bitcoin, but you can only use Bitcoin. And so, like, I know Roger Ver has, like, he's the CEO of Bitcoin Store, has, like, said publicly years ago, like, yeah, when Amazon starts accepting Bitcoin, we'll have to change our business model or whatever. But until then, we're giving them an incentive to do it.
Yeah, but my opinion is, and Overstock.com has said the same thing, that as soon as enough retailers like start accepting Bitcoin, it'll force Amazon into taking it.
Yeah.
And I just don't agree. I don't agree with, like, I understand Roger's sentiment, but he's going to be in business for a long time because Amazon is not. There's no reason for them to do it. They, as far as like people making plays, putting their pieces into position, Amazon's a company that's been doing it in spades.
Yeah.
And I talk about something being called. I called this on my own show, Sovereign Tech, 2 years ago.
You did. I remember that.
I was like, look, Amazon's going to, yeah.
So does the NSA.
Right. Yeah. But I said, Amazon's not going to accept Bitcoin. Amazon's going to become the biggest tech company in the world. Okay. And they're moving into this because Amazon already have an Amazon coin. Okay. To some degree. And I think we've even talked about this on this show in the past.
Yeah. Even their graphics for it, it's like some kind of store credit thing. And it even looks like the physical Bitcoin, the Casacious coins. Yeah.
Right. But they also have Amazon Payments, which is a system that runs through Amazon that allows you to pay your bills. Okay. So, and then as far as like one of the critiques people have against Bitcoin is that it doesn't work very well at the point of sale. Okay.
Right.
A lot of people say that, or that it doesn't work well necessarily in the meat space in buying real products. It's great on the internet. It's the ultimate internet currency. Yeah, I agree with that or not. Yeah. But Amazon is in the perfect position for that because they're already putting their delivery boxes in various stores like Radio Shack and others. And they are going to be releasing their $200 Kindle point of sale system, which smokes what the average point of sale system costs, which on average is over $800. You want a good one, you're paying almost $2,000, $3,000 for a great point of sale system. $200 point of sale, you've already got the system in place for, internationally, for people to buy retail goods with Amazon software right there, which means that it can automatically accept Amazon coin. Okay, instantaneously. So Amazon is really, in my opinion, the only thing that has the infrastructure that could literally make Bitcoin obsolete.
Wow. That's a pretty strong statement.
It's a strong statement, but I think that that's entirely possible. They are the only, not Google, not Facebook, not Microsoft, not Apple. Amazon's the only one that has enough tendrils, that has enough tentacles out there.
Amazon
to really
is becoming the Google of stuff. I mean,
sure, they
really
got their
are.
own phone coming out this year too. You think that phone's going to cost $600 like Google sells them for?
Yeah.
No, it's going to cost probably $150 or $200.
Yeah,
people would be almost dumb not to buy it. And the thing,
anyway. And they have this really long-term strategy too, where they want to kind of get everyone hooked on their stuff, and like they don't care. They'll sell it cheap. They're not like out to make big profits. They're in the long term. They want to get everyone using their stuff.
They don't make profits.
Yeah.
They tick off their investors constantly.
Yeah.
Because they don't turn a profit, and Bezos just has to keep telling them, look, just wait. Okay. And that's the thing, is that you've got a company that's literally willing to go for broke. And that's a scare. I mean, and they did go for broke. That's why they had a bond sale last year. Okay. Buy in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
I'd rather buy Amazon bonds than U.S. Treasury bonds.
Oh, hell yes.
But yeah, what are they going to do with that money? Sure.
Yeah. But that's the thing, is they're willing to go for broke, and people are willing to keep believing in them. So I think they're an unstoppable company.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, there's so much talk about retail businesses accepting Bitcoin, and we just need to get merchants on board with Bitcoin. But really, I don't know if that really deserves that much focus from Bitcoiners, because like when a new merchant accepts Bitcoin, usually what they do is just turn it right into US dollars and use BitPay or something to Coinbase to process the payments. They're really just using it as a payment method. They're not actually holding on to the Bitcoins. They don't actually care about Bitcoin. They're just like, oh, there's a community of people who are really excited about this type of money, well, yeah, we'll take money from them, sure. And they don't really, they're not actually really moving Bitcoin forward that much, except the fact that maybe people will be exposed to it when they try to check out and say, oh, what's this Bitcoin thing,
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing at these conferences is we've got a lot of companies, some great companies doing really great things, but let's be fair, they're just integrating Bitcoin into the status quo,
right?
Into the legacy market. Okay, that exists, the legacy consumerism, whatever.
Yeah, and that's not terribly exciting to me. I mean, you could say with Amazon, they're not going to accept Bitcoin, but there are ways to spend Bitcoin on Amazon. For instance, you can buy Amazon gift cards with Bitcoin through Gift or eGift or whatever. Sure. There are also gift exchanges, Purse.io and Broker, where you can basically you buy something from someone's Amazon wish list and then you get Bitcoin in exchange for the dollar amount of that item.
Right.
And so that's a cool way to buy Bitcoins with a credit card. And people use those, and so there is still Bitcoin in the Amazon world. There
is, but I think a lot of the big name investors that are interested in Bitcoin, I think they're starting to take an interest because they see it as the only challenger to what they might be seeing. Because I can't be the only one that sees Amazon.
Yeah, all these companies, eBay, PayPal, they're filing patents for digital tokens and stuff. Even JP Morgan Chase. We'll see what happens, but we got to talk about some sex in the next segment.
Let's get to sex.
Stay tuned. It's Sex and Science Hour. Sex and Science Hour is looking for sponsors. We do our best to do an entertaining show that is heard by thousands of people each week. Do you have a project, business, product, or service that could match our audience's interests? Let us know. Contact Brian at letstalkbitcoin.com to find out more. That's Brian with an I at letstalkbitcoin.com. Here at Sex and Science Hour, we really appreciate your support. We've received tips from listeners, not just in Bitcoin, but with other altcoins. Those are always listed in our show notes in case you want to send us a tip, which we thank you for very, very much. If you don't have Bitcoins, altcoins, or you just want to send us a tip in a way that's free to you, all you have to do is click on something, then you can help us out. Simply do your normal shopping on Amazon through our Amazon affiliate links. Those are listed in our show notes, and we've got Amazon US, UK, and Canada for you. Thank you so much for all your support. And now, back to the show. This is Sex and Science Hour, segment 3. Wow, that last one went really fast. And all we did was talk about big companies and Bitcoin. So I think now we're going to talk about sex and science.
Yeah,
the name of our show.
Switch it up.
Getting back to our roots here on Sex and Science Hour. By the way, I just wanted to say, we met so many people at the conferences we were at last week who said that they loved Sex and Science Hour. And that was so cool. Sometimes when you're a podcaster, you record shows and you're like, does anyone actually listen to this? Do people actually care? But they do. So thank you for listening. And thank you for telling us that you listen to the show. That's always really encouraging to us. If you want to send us email, relationship questions, show prep, other issues, liberty questions, you can get us at show@sexandsciencehour.com, and that will go to both me and Brian.
Yeah, it was really nice actually getting to meet a lot of the listeners. And in fact, I even got a comment from one who said, wow, you're a lot bigger than I expected.
Yeah, that's the thing. People are used to hearing our voices because we don't do video. Video is just so much work, I don't.
Oh, that, and I think it kills your productivity.
Yeah, I think so too. There's something I really like personally about the audio medium and listening to podcasts because it doesn't limit you. You can do other things like drive and cook and clean and whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Work on other things, look at other things.
Have sex.
Have sex, yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do that. But audio is not limiting like video is, where you kind of have to keep your eyes on it. And so, but people don't know what we look like. So then they meet us at conferences and they're like, ooh, wow, you're exceptionally good looking or whatever. Or, yo, you don't look how I expected you to look.
Right,
you don't look how I pictured you. Well, sorry, nothing I can do about that.
Yeah, I'm a big guy.
Yeah, it's fun. It's always fun to put a disembodied voice with a face. But anyway, we got to get into our show prep here, Brian. There is, okay, so this story has both sex and science in it. I thought it was kind of interesting and cool, and it might spur a discussion because I think you and I might differ on this a little bit. We've talked about 3D printing organs before on this show, and now apparently there has been a team of scientists who basically there are some women who are born with genetic conditions where they have anatomical issues where they don't have like much of a vagina, or they have like a short one, or it's absent, and they, of course, they don't have a uterus either. And so what these people did was they created like a scaffold, and they grew cells on the scaffold, and they were able to like make it into kind of a tube-like shape and create like lab-grown artificial vaginas for these women who were born without them, and then give them a transplant. And it like, integrated into their body. It grew as they grew, like they had the surgery when they're teenagers or whatever. And the girls reported that they had better quality of life and they were happy and so forth. So,
well, regardless of one's opinion on this matter, I don't think anyone can argue that this is absolutely amazing human ingenuity.
Oh, totally.
Just remarkable.
I'm really looking forward to the time when we can pretty much 3D print any type of organ.
Yeah.
And this is quickly becoming a reality. I mean, I remember the kind of organs that have simple structures, like a bladder or a trachea or something like that. Like that's just kind of a bladder is just kind of like a balloon, and so you just need like a simple spherical kind of scaffold for it and the right cell type, and you can just grow one. Same thing with a trachea. It's kind of like a tube, and I guess with a vagina mostly. Those are the easiest ones to start out with.
Sure.
Something with more complex structure like an ear or an eye or a liver or a lung is going to be more difficult, but those are coming too.
Yeah, they're working on an ear, but that required a little bit of electronics. Like they put a wire in the ear to be able to receive things. I mean, it wasn't something that was just totally organic.
Yeah, that's kind of a proof of concept too.
Yeah.
But those things are getting close to reality. So yeah, definitely amazing technology. But what do you think about this from kind of a social standpoint, Brian? Like I kind of read this, and maybe I'm like losing my mind, but like I sort of had this reaction like, oh, so they're printing vaginas for like the men to use with these women. Like, oh, it's a tragedy these women don't have vaginas. Why don't we better fix that right away. They're not printing organs that are like, they're not printing like clitorises for women who get them violently circumcised in these tribal kind of traditions. They're not 3D printing foreskins for men who get them chopped off, and that affects their sexual function. So, what do you think? Well, but you said you had an opposite viewpoint to that.
Well, I mean, you got to admit this is better than burning off a clitoris.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, and I guess, well, I wonder, my first question is do they feel it? When they are having sex, is there a sensation?
They said that the women reported better sexual function, and I would assume that to a certain extent the nerves can grow into the structure, but it's not going to be like a natural vagina because It doesn't have the different tissues in the different places like the G-spot or whatever.
I mean, my thoughts on this, and I describe myself as a feminist. I'm just going to say that I'm just glad that science is actually paying attention to women for once, because throughout history, they haven't cared.
Yeah, that's true.
So I see it as a pretty positive thing. I get your point, though, that
they didn't print a uterus too, and you could argue a uterus may be somewhat similar in terms of the complexity and the structure. Right. But I guess they're not going to, maybe they have issues where they're not going to be like able to reproduce anyway. But at least they can have a vagina. I don't know.
I would say this. I think if you asked a woman who had damage to her her sexual organs, lesbian or heterosexual or bi, whatever. If you could ask her the one thing that she could have, okay, she's in love with someone else or whatever, I guarantee you this is the first thing she's going to ask for. Because, there's a level of closeness. I mean, this is the thing is that sex is pleasure, no doubt about it. Okay. But sex is also a very, I don't believe in a soul. I'm an atheist. Okay. But It is a merging of souls.
You're going to get all spiritual on me here, Brian.
No, well, it is. I mean, it is a complete letting down of all the personal boundaries and walls that you have. Okay. And so, one could find, I think, a degree of importance in having this, outside of the pleasure, because even if they can't feel it, okay, they still get to experience that extreme closeness, which is, for me, the real beauty of sex, the real joy of sex. It's just that someone is willing to be that open and honest with you in such a physical act.
So it's like an emotional experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying for sure. I mean, it's just one option, though, when it comes to sex. Like, there are lots of other things that you can do that you can be really intimate and close with somebody else that don't require PIV, as I like to call it, penetration.
Yeah, I think that proves your point.
And I think that there is an element of society that just focuses on vaginal intercourse as the end all be all. Like we've talked about this on the show before. What actually is virginity? Like, if someone's never had PIV, heterosexual sexual intercourse, but they've done oral sex or they've done other acts, like, are they a virgin? If they're if somebody's a so-called gold star gay, which means they've never had sex with the opposite sex, they've only been with the same gender. Are they a virgin? Did they ever lose their virginity? It's just like, it gets really silly and like really, really focus on this one specific act, which is a great act, but if you're into it. But it's not the only thing.
Yeah, no, that's important, and I think that might be where maybe your thought kind of comes in. Is that if this is like the center of and let's face it, in society, it is the centerpiece of sex in society. That doesn't mean it's right, because it's not.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think also, though, if you're a woman that wants that full experience, or maybe you're a guy that is going through a transition.
Yeah, that's another thing I was thinking is, like, could this be useful for guys who are trans women who are transitioning to female?
Sure, and in that regard, please, let's do this.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. I see the reservations, like if a woman just feels pressured that by maybe her mate, in that he, hey, I can't put my penis in you, I got to get a vagina. That's a problem. But by and large, I think it's a very good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm always for people having more autonomy and choice and options to do whatever they want with their own bodies. So in that respect, it's great. And I really appreciate that these scientists did this. So I think we'll just leave it there. Thanks for talking about that with me.
Sure.
And, I've got another Bitcoin article that I wanted to talk about that I found really entertaining. It's called The Do's and Don'ts of Talking About Bitcoin with Noobs.
Ooh, this is a pet topic of yours.
It is actually since about the end of last year. I've been really thinking, it's sort of like reevaluating what I want to focus on within Bitcoin, and really thinking that I want more of my focus to be on reaching out to people like that don't know about it, rather than giving talks to Bitcoin people who already know everything about it. And like, I just can't compete in that realm. I don't have like a super technical Bitcoin project that I work on. I do have a few Bitcoin projects, but they're not technical. I'm not building the newest, greatest, latest platform that will let you control everything from a Skynet of doom. I'm not I'm not starting an exchange and raising millions of dollars in venture capital. I'm just someone who's interested in Bitcoin and like interested in charity and media and so forth. But I do like to teach people about Bitcoin, and I think I have a good way of breaking it down for people who've never heard of it before.
I do too, and I think this is pretty important because I actually have experienced this where I was at a dinner just recently, and one of the people at the dinners asked the waiter, hey, do you accept Bitcoin? And the guy's like, Bitcoin? What's that?
Yeah.
And they just started all spouting out all these explanations, and I'm like, none of this is going to help.
Yeah, we didn't even say anything.
No, we just sat there quiet.
This was the party of 9 people that we couldn't fit in the restaurant in New York to bring it full circle. And yeah, it was like one person said, hey, do you accept Bitcoin? And the guy goes, no, what's that? And everyone's like, crypto anarchism, digital currency, Silk Road. Like they were just saying all this stuff, and it seemed like it was probably hard for to understand. So not that there's anything wrong with that, but this person, Joseph S. Dietrich, who wrote this article for CoinChomp, never heard of CoinChomp before, but that's kind of cute. He says basically that he doesn't think the word cryptocurrency helps at all. He says it reminds people of crypto Nazis and cryptosporidium, which is a germ found in fecal matter that causes diarrhea. Now, okay, let's be fair, Joseph. Come on. If somebody doesn't know what cryptocurrency is, they probably don't know what cryptosporidium is either. But yeah. I'll take the point. I think it probably doesn't describe it too well. I like to try to say math-based currency or digital cash or something like that.
Yeah,
rather than cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I think using the word crypto can either make it really cool for someone or it can make it really nefarious.
Yeah, depending on who you're talking to, totally.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
So one of the keys is gauging your audience, and about that. But I do see his point, sure.
Yeah.
I don't think the term helps.
Don't get technical was the first tip. Be careful with terminology. Do highlight social impacts and personal benefits, which I like the idea of that too. Hey, this is bringing freedom to people all over the world, and this is how entrepreneurship and remittances and microlending and use on feature phones and so forth. I think those are good ways to talk about Bitcoin.
Sure, I agree. Or depending on your crowd, you could say, hey, no, this is an easy way to get drugs.
Right. Well, that was the next tip. Highlight personal benefits. What can Bitcoin do for me?
For some, that's a personal benefit.
Yeah. And I like to try to think about that when I talk about Bitcoin. But, the one thing that he really says that I love most of all in this article is go beyond words, which this has been something that I've been saying and thinking about a lot lately, is like you can talk about Bitcoin for an hour, or you can just show the person how to set up a Bitcoin wallet on their computer or phone or whatever, and then send them 1 millibit or 5 millibits or whatever you want to give them. And they will never, ever forget that. Because I've never forgotten the first person who helped me set up a wallet and the first person who gave me Bitcoins. And I go back years later and talk to someone who I helped, and they remember it too. Right. And it is so helpful, especially when you're a new user and you're like kind of scared to ask questions. Like sometimes people are afraid they're going to look dumb if they ask questions.
Sure.
That's a super common fear. And so just reassuring people, no, that's not a dumb question. I had the exact same one, and here's what's up with that question, right?
Yeah.
Can go a really long way. Yeah. Have you had any experiences with talking to new people about Bitcoin? I mean, you're a media person. You do your own podcast.
Generally, no. Just because most people that I end up talking to are already kind of on board.
Right.
You
don't like people anyway.
Yeah, really, So I'm usually spending most of my time talking about NXT or something with them anyway, but
yeah. So another thing in this article, he suggests don't do overly complicated discussions about economics, Austrian or otherwise.
I agree.
And I thought that was really funny that he mentioned that, because I got asked to give a new user Bitcoin talk at the Toronto Bitcoin Expo.
Yeah.
And that was something that I also did at the Texas Bitcoin Conference, and then I did it again at the Toronto one. And I really enjoy doing that. And I had like a talk all prepared. But at the Toronto conference, there was another person that was scheduled, and he was affiliated, he was with the Mises Institute of Canada.
Right.
And he was scheduled like at the same time as me to do the kind of free session to bring new users on board with Bitcoin. And he had a talk prepared too, and I didn't know we were going to kind of be going at the same time, so I wasn't sure how it would go.
Right.
And he gave a talk that was it was wonderful. I learned a lot. I was enlightened, I definitely learned about history, Austrian economics, but like it was so not good for total noobs. It was like the first thing was a Mises quote, and then he went into Hayek and Rothbard and all the Austrian economics and the the regression theorem, and just these geeky economic things that I don't think really resonated with everybody who was there as a total newbie who just was like, what the heck is Bitcoin? So I agree with that. Don't get overly complicated with economics, Austrian or otherwise. Wow, are we out of time already? Well, there's just one more article that I wanted to talk about. Now there's this thing called that is basically software that allows anybody to become a so-called walking Bitcoin ATM. This is going to revolutionize peer-to-peer trading. I think it's going to make it so much easier for people to trade Bitcoins in a truly decentralized way, peer-to-peer for cash.
Yeah, I love the sound of this.
And this is really exciting. But we are out of time, so we won't be able to talk about that too much. Email us, show@sexandsciencehour.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Stephanie, and you're Brian.
Of course.
And we'll be back next Thursday with more Sex and Science Hour.
More sex and science.
Yeah, just leave off the end science here. You've just heard Sex and Science Hour.
Game over. Play again next week.